for the last Fireside chat format of today. And I know that makes you pretty disappointed because we still have 3 more days of SF Blockchain Week. We'd like to introduce to you an exciting duo. They were colleagues during the early days of Coinbase, and today I'm sure you've heard of both. Please welcome to the stage the creator of Litecoin, Charlie Lee, and the founder of One Confirmation, Nick Tomaino.
Now it's on. You good? All right, so we're going to start off with a few fun questions, and then we'll get a little more serious. But on the fun side, what are your thoughts on the new Soulja Boy song?
Yeah, he's talked about Litecoin. I'm in Litecoin, so that's great. But the song was kind of boring.
I personally, I've been waiting. I'm a hip hop fan, and I've been waiting for a rapper to reference crypto for a while. So I like the Bitcoin and Litecoin reference.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
So the second question is, who was the best ping pong player at Coinbase?
Obviously it was me.
I don't remember that, but okay. So on a more serious note, so I think about 5 years ago at Coinbase, most of us internally were very focused on Bitcoin. And I think Brian even famously tweeted, the focus should be on Bitcoin. All of the other coins at the time are a big distraction. And clearly, you haven't founded Litecoin before joining Coinbase. You didn't really agree with that sentiment, but I think even you, believed and maybe still believe that kind of Bitcoin is the most important thing to focus on. But I'm curious, has the explosion in ICOs and tokens kind of over the past really 18 months surprised you? And what do you make of it just generally? Particularly putting yourself in the perspective of like 5 years ago and where we saw things going.
Well, I think when I joined Coinbase in 2013, and the reason why is because I realized Bitcoin is the kind of the main coin. So in order for any coins or even Litecoin to succeed, Bitcoin has to really become adopted, right? People have to use it. So it's important to make Bitcoin easy to use. So I guess your question about tokens, it wasn't surprising to me. So before the token explosion of last year, we had the altcoin explosion of 2012, 2013. That was the first part, and then that's when the price went up to 1,000, 1,200, and it crashed back down. So kind of the token explosion last year helped the price go up to 20,000, 18,000.
So you weren't surprised about just kind of for me, the kind of how ICOs and tokens have become kind of a mainstream phenomenon. I never would have predicted that would be really what propels the category. I guess you're saying kind of 2013 kind of alluded to that, so you're not that surprised by it?
Yeah, I mean, people like to kind of gamble and make money. So Ethereum made it very easy for tokens for people to do ICOs and for everyone to invest in these ICOs. So yeah, I wouldn't say it was mainstream though. It's just.
So do you think there will be another bigger ICO explosion in the future?
I don't think it will be a bigger ICO explosion, but I think crypto will go mainstream in the future. By mainstream, I mean everyone's heard of Bitcoin. Everyone uses it for store value for payments. That's going to take some time, but we'll get there.
And how do you view kind of Litecoin playing into that equation? I mean, I know in the past 12 months, I think Litecoin was kind of influential in getting SegWit adopted into Bitcoin by being kind of the test bed. And that's kind of been a narrative that some people talk about in terms of Litecoin. Is that, do you see it that way as well? And what are some of the future kind of tests that you think we could see on Litecoin that may ultimately get to Bitcoin?
Well, when I created Litecoin, kind of position it as a complement to Bitcoin. So that's how I came up with like the silver to Bitcoin's gold tagline. And I've always seen like that hasn't changed. And as we saw last year, Litecoin was really able to kind of help Bitcoin a little bit, and I'm very proud of that. I think in the future, there's definitely other opportunities where Litecoin can kind of take the first step. I think things like more privacy, more fungibility may become a more controversial topic, and that's something that Litecoin potentially could kind of help Bitcoin out also.
So are there any specific privacy initiatives that you guys are thinking about kind of at the Litecoin Foundation now, or?
The first thing is, kind of the first thing on our radar is confidential transaction. So being able to hide the amount that you're sending. So Monero has that. Monero has confidential transaction and ring signature. So confidential transaction, I think, would be very useful. So today, when you're spending Bitcoin or Litecoin, you kind of have to understand or know where your money is, like the different outputs that you have. So for example, if you bought 10 Bitcoins off an exchange and you send it to your wallet, you may not want to send the output for those 10 Bitcoin to your friend or to a coffee shop because you don't want them to know how much money you have. So then you may choose a smaller output. And that's something that's not really good for money, right? You want money to be fungible. You don't want to take out your wallet and have to decide which $20 bill to spend because one of them gives away your account balance, for example. So I think that fungibility is something that we need to solve eventually for Bitcoin and Litecoin, and confidential transaction is like kind of the first step towards that.
You and I actually haven't really talked about this, but I'm curious how you view price stability as like a characteristic that you need for cryptocurrency to get to a medium of exchange. Because I mean, from my own personal experience, I used Bitcoin to purchase my fiance's wedding ring at the time back in 2013. And I did it on Reeds, which Coinbase, we were powering Reeds, and you could get a 3% discount. And so I was kind of doing it to support the initiative. But it's the worst purchase that I've ever made, right?
I bought a house for that money.
Exactly. So to me, the fixed supply of cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin and Litecoin really makes it not an ideal medium of exchange right now. And I think the argument may be that, you know, in some time the price will stabilize and it will end up being a good medium of exchange. But I'm personally very excited about stablecoins, kind of approaches that have price stability similar to that of like the US dollar, combined with the decentralization of something like Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin. And so how do you think stablecoins are interesting? How do you view kind of Litecoin's adoption as a medium of exchange and that being a potential bottleneck?
I think the volatility definitely hurts the usage today, but I think the volatility will fix itself over time. So we are already less volatile today than like 4 years ago, and I mean the reason why it's volatile is because people don't know where we're going, right? Bitcoin could potentially become the world reserve currency, or it could become nothing, right? So that's why it's so volatile. But I think over time, as people realize the potential of cryptocurrency, the price will go up and it'll become less volatile. So I think that's a problem that will fix itself over time. In the meantime, like stable coins, I guess it's not that interesting to me. I think the best stable coin out there would be like a stable fiat coin that a government would come in and kind of do, right? So the US government decided to release a crypto USD backed by US dollar that they have, then it's going to be like the best stable coin, right? Because in the end, you still have to trust the government for the value of the US dollar. So there's no reason not to trust them to run this stable coin. And for me, for a lot of people in this space, we don't want to rely on the government controlling the value or the amount and value of the currency. So that's why we invest in, we move our money to like cryptocurrency.
I think maybe a couple of years ago I would have kind of agreed with that view, but from my perspective, like if you look at Tether right now, right, which lacks transparency, and is highly centralized. And despite those two things, it's the second most actively traded cryptocurrency on a daily basis, right? It trades over $1 billion a day around the world. And so to me, that's actually an indication that there is kind of a need in the market from people right now for a stable coin. And I think if you can, the challenge is getting the decentralization and the transparency, which kind of, we're still not there yet on stable coins. But I don't know, what do you think of things like Tether and how widely adopted, Tether has become, right now?
I think there's definitely a need for traders to use a stable cryptocurrency so that they can easily get in and out of position and also transfer between exchanges for arbitrage or other reasons. And that's why, even though Tether is not very transparent, people use it a lot. And I think I don't disagree that there's value for a stablecoin. I just think that it's not that interesting because the government can come in and do one, or not necessarily the US government, but another government can also do it.
And you think that something more decentralized like Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin can ultimately decrease its volatility to a point and become kind of more of a medium exchange? So it sounds like you think that
I think in the end game would be cryptocurrency will be mass adopted, and it will actually be the default currency people use, and fiat currency will be the currency that's volatile.
Okay. So I was reviewing the Coinbase Series C deck from back in 2014 the other day, and the deck, it was interesting to me, I forgot this, but the deck really focused on the developer platform that Coinbase was working on, right? There was a lot of focus on how developers were really important, and that was like a big focus for the company at the time. And we raised a $75 million Series C on that, and it never really played out like that for Coinbase, right? I think it's still TBD whether it will over the long term, but it turned out that just crypto as an asset class that people were trading and speculating was a big enough opportunity. And so I'm curious now, what your perspective is on kind of developers and developer activity making crypto actually more useful, right? Because from my perspective, and most of what I'm investing in right now with my fund is projects that are building on Ethereum, because I see a lot of developer activity there. But I know you historically haven't been as positive on Ethereum, so I'm curious kind of what your take is on developer activity right now, and how that might be important or not important for the future growth of crypto.
I think Coinbase was just early. So we're still in kind of the speculative phase of cryptocurrency. A lot of people are still just buying it, holding it, investing, or speculating in the value of cryptocurrency. They're not really using it. I think one of the reasons why with Bitcoin we haven't seen a lot of third-party developers on it is because we just have to solve the scaling problem, right? So now with Lightning, that's people working on Lightning, we're seeing a lot of Lightning apps being developed, and I think we'll see a lot more of that. And compare that to Ethereum, the reason why I'm not very excited about Ethereum is, in my point of view, Ethereum sacrificed decentralization to get the scale and to get all the activity for people building on the Ethereum chain, doing smart contracts on chain. I think that's a short-sighted approach.
Specifically, why don't you talk about how they, in your view, sacrifice decentralization?
Yeah, the Ethereum blockchain is orders of magnitude bigger than the Bitcoin blockchain. So in order for people to, actually it's really hard for anyone to run Ethereum node today. If you tried, even technical person like myself, we have a hard time keeping Ethereum node up to date. You have to have a really fast computer. You have to make sure it syncs properly. It's just hard for a normal person to run Ethereum node today. So Ethereum nodes are being run by corporations, being run by miners, and that makes it very decentralized. A bit more centralized than Bitcoin. Because in the end, if corporations come together or being forced by governments or whatnot to do something, right? To change the mining rewards or things like that, there's nothing that users can do to stop it. Whereas with Bitcoin and Litecoin, we're more decentralized, so that anyone can run a node, and I think that's very important for a cryptocurrency, for a decentralized one. And in the end, like when you lose decentralization, it's just hard to get it back, and then you're really no different than a centralized smart contract platform, right? Like right now, if Google or Amazon is running their own smart contract platform, most people would trust Google or Amazon to not steal your CryptoKitties or whatever you're using on it. And that would be 100 times more efficient than running on Ethereum. So I don't see the full benefit of doing a fully decentralized smart contract platform.
That's interesting. I mean, from my perspective, like, I used to be a Bitcoin maximalist, right? And kind of fully behind decentralization, and decentralization in my mind was binary, right? You're either decentralized or not. I think over time, I've recognized that there's kind of degrees of decentralization, right? And I think while Ethereum in some respects is more centralized than Bitcoin or Litecoin, I think it might be the case that to do a developer platform and a smart contract platform, you actually need a bit more centralization, right? And so, like Bitcoin or Litecoin, we're not seeing smart contract-based apps in the wild, right? And Ethereum has things like MakerDAO and Augur that are actually live smart contracts that people are using, right? So, how do you just think that is in the end not going to matter because the thing is centralized and someone can shut it down, and that's going to kind of ruin it as a development platform, or what do you
I think Ethereum is good, and I think people working on the smart contract platform on Ethereum is good. I'm focused on the sound money aspect of Bitcoin and Litecoin, and I don't think Ethereum is there in terms of sound money, and that's fine. Like you said, we don't need decentralization is kind of it's a means to an end, and the end goal for that is just it's censorship resistant and immutability. And like you said, it's not a black and white, right? So Bitcoin is not perfectly decentralized, but I think we are decentralized enough such that it's censorship resistant and immutable. And a platform like Ethereum, I don't think is censorship resistant and immutable like Bitcoin. And for example, we saw the DAO hard fork, right? So a small group of people were able to kind of hard fork Ethereum and reverse a transaction. So it's not immutable by any means. And we're seeing more and more of that, like people talking about unlocking funds and doing another hard fork. And I think that's fine, but for sound money, I don't think we should ever get to a point where we're taking money away from people. So it's just a different focus.
Makes sense. So switching gears a little bit, what first attracted me to cryptocurrencies broadly was kind of the social aspect of what I saw. I first read a Wired article talking about Bitcoin being used for guns and drugs on the Silk Road, and I immediately dove into r/Bitcoin and Bitcoin Talk, some of the early online forums, and saw that there were people from around the world that weren't connected by physical location, but were connected by kind of a shared belief system and economic incentives, meaning they all own Bitcoin. And to me, I think that's still an underestimated kind of aspect of what's happening globally. And I think for you, you are one of the leaders of a cryptocurrency that understands kind of community most, and I think people kind of dismiss Litecoin for different reasons, for not being super innovative, and kind of underestimate the community behind Litecoin. So maybe talk a little bit about how you view community as kind of an important aspect of cryptocurrency, and how you've been able to kind of foster a pretty healthy community with Litecoin.
Yeah, I think cryptocurrency, when Bitcoin started, the mining community is the community. So the way Bitcoin works is kind of like a startup where it would give out mining rewards to early adopters. So it's similar to how a startup would give early employees a lot of stock options, and over time that would decrease. And similarly, the early miners would be going out there to kind of like convince others to buy into Bitcoin, to look into it, and that works really well. And I think one of the reasons why for Litecoin I switched the proof of work to something different is because I want to kind of have my own set of miners, right? So it's not competing with Bitcoin. So people who are mining Litecoin would go out there to help push Litecoin adoption. And that worked out really well. As Bitcoin switched to ASICs, Litecoin switched to GPU, so all the GPU miners that were previously mining Bitcoin started mining Litecoin. I think it's just lucky coincidence that happened. So Litecoin community kind of was created out of that.
How did you even go about like finding early miners and things like that? Like I imagine you were pretty active on things like Bitcoin Talk, and is that how you were kind of finding these people to participate? Or?
Yeah, I think in 2011, Bitcoin Talk forum everyone was on Bitcoin Talk forum. The crazy thing is, in 2011, when I first found out about Bitcoin...
By the way, it's the 7-year anniversary of Litecoin today, right?
Correct, yeah. It's the 7-year anniversary of when I created a Litecoin Genesis blog. Litecoin was launched a week later, but the Genesis blog was created 7 years from today. I was saying, when I first found out Bitcoin in April 2011, you can pretty much go onto Bitcoin Talk forum and read everything about Bitcoin that you ever want to know that's happening around the world. Today, there's no way you can do that, right? You can't follow everything. So back then, Bitcoin Talk was just, everybody was on it and everyone was talking on it. Before I launched Litecoin, there were about a dozen other altcoins, so it wasn't like the second altcoin. So it still had to compete with all these other altcoins. It wasn't simple actually. When I launched Litecoin, there was a lot of haters back then too. People were hating on Litecoin, saying that you're not doing anything special. There's all these other coins out there. Why are you creating a new one? But all these other coins are dead. So,
from my perspective, I think one thing that like Bitcoin and Litecoin really got right, like you said, is you put this thing out in the world. And from close to the beginning, anyone can participate in it, right? All you need to do is have a computer and an internet connection, right? And I think one of the things that most ICOs out there are missing is they're kind of utilizing the token as a fundraising mechanism, but they're, for the most part, in some cases doing pre-sales where it's an exclusive group of investors that can participate, and if they're doing something public, it's still kind of not as inclusive and open from the beginning. And from my view, that makes it really challenging to have a healthy community in the long term. Would you agree with that, disagree with that?
It's definitely hard today to kind of create a new token. It's all mindshare, right? So you're competing with thousands, tens of thousands of all these other ICO tokens, and that's why these tokens are focused more on marketing than anything else, right? They're spending all their money on marketing, getting on exchanges, and getting people to buy into their product. So I would say a lot of these products technically are not good at all, right? It's just all about marketing. And unfortunately, even if you have a good project, if you don't spend a lot on marketing, it's hard to kind of for people to see it. So it's tough these days.
And how do you think that plays out in the long run for a lot of these tokens? Because I think there will be a wide variety of outcomes, but even if you look at something like Dogecoin, right, which the founder left, no one uses it. I think there's still somewhat of a community, but it's not a strong community. But it still has a total market value of a couple $100 million, right? And I think there's just I call it mimetic value. They have there's a meme that people still hold it kind of based on the meme. And like you said, I think most ICOs out there today are 100% mimetic value and no actually underlying value. But do you kind of agree with that? How do you think, how do you foresee kind of tokens and ICOs, this generation of them kind of playing out?
First, speaking of Dogecoin, I think that Dogecoin is actually pretty cool because it's actually, the point about cryptocurrency is transfer of value, right? Transfer value in such a way that it's fast, you can't censor it, and you can't change it after the fact. And with Dogecoin, because it's merged with Litecoin, it actually functions really well in terms of the transfer of value aspect of it. So even if the founder is not there anymore, even if the code hasn't been updated in years, it still works as advertised. And that's why it has value. Compared to a lot of these other coins where you can get 51% tag for like a few $1,000s, right? So the security is not there, and that's why the other coins don't have value, because you can, it's not decentralized, it's not secure. In terms of like token being, I think it's kind of similar to the internet crash of 2001, where if the company is a good company, they just have to kind of put their head down and work hard, and then it will become valuable in the future when all these other companies that are all about marketing kind of just die out. So the same thing for any token project. If you actually have something of value, just work hard and you will be paid. You will succeed in the long run, right? And all these other companies that are focused on marketing, people will eventually figure out that it's all the fluff and the value will have.
Okay. We've got a few more minutes. I wanted to ask you a little bit about Asia, because obviously your brother Bobby founded a Bitcoin exchange there, and you've spent a good amount of time there. And I actually just got back from a trip to South Korea and Japan. It was my first time there, and kind of seeing what's going on there was really interesting for me. And I think from a consumer demand perspective, there seems to just be tremendous demand. So obviously there's a lot of nuances within the different markets within Asia, but maybe speak a little bit about kind of your time in Asia and how important is Asia kind of in the future of this kind of global movement?
I think in Asia, a lot of people they're more into like gambling, so they're more looking at the space as a way to make money. Whereas here in the US, of course, there's obviously where people are looking into it as a way to make money, but people are also focused on adoption and people using the coins, and it's really it's a lot less about using the coins in Asia. So if you go there, you can see a drastic difference. People don't care about using it. It's all about investment and speculation.
All right. So I guess the last question is, what are you most excited about for like the next 5 years, and how do you, what are the things that you really want to work on or push forward, whether it's with Litecoin or Bitcoin or otherwise?
I think now that we have Segwit activated both like Bitcoin and Litecoin, I'm really excited about just the next step, which is scaling secondary solutions like Lightning Network that can help Bitcoin Litecoin scale, and also address some of the needs like using it for payments. And also Lightning Network gives us a bit more privacy and fungibility, and it's pretty much like the next step that I'm really excited about, where we can take cryptocurrency space.
And you mentioned kind of haters earlier around Litecoin, and I think similarly there's a lot of haters around kind of Lightning right now, right? So what do you think people are missing about Lightning? And maybe talk a little bit about what you're seeing in terms of activity and why there's kind of evidence right now that we should be excited about it.
Yeah, so I think the two camps are like people who think scaling off-chain or second layer is the right way to do it, and then other camp wants to scale on-chain. And the scaling on-chain camp definitely has a lot of thought about Lightning. I mean, Lightning is work in progress. There are definitely issues, but it's not an easy solution. People are working through the different problems it has. But I really believe it's the best way to help Bitcoin Litecoin scale without sacrificing decentralization and security. And I think the sound money properties of Bitcoin and Litecoin is what actually gives it value. And if you sacrifice that just for a short bump in transaction throughput, you're kind of, it's kind of silly in my point of view. You're just, you're building PayPal 2.0, and before you know it, it's going to be centralized and controlled by corporations and the government, and it's not really the money that I want to build.
All right, with that, thanks very much, Charlie. Appreciate it.
Thank you.